Hey there, welcome back to the Producer Joe Show. I am your host, Producer Joe, and because of that, keep in mind throughout the show, I do both jobs, producing and hosting. So if I look like I'm inattentive, I am not. I'm listening and intently to whatever my guest has to say. I just have buttons to push and everything. So again, I appreciate you tuning in. So I came up with a new motto for the show, and I believe that this is the 37th episode of my show. So pretty happy. Things are going really good. Came up with a new motto. Uh, I believe everyone has a story to tell. And I believe that to be true because anybody out there, they've got a story and a lot of them are willing to share it. So if anybody has anything interesting to say, reach out to me and maybe we can get you on. So hopefully you caught my show last week. I had Brian Perry on, host of Disney Jeopardy. Super nice guy. It was a lot of fun. We talked about a ton of stuff. That is on my YouTube page. So today's guest, I've known this man a long time. He is certainly a staple in this town. To me, he is an architect of sports talk radio as we know it, and somebody who I listened to. I don't want to put a year on it. A long time ago. A lot of fun. Well, here we go. We're going to go ahead and bring in Lee Hacksaw Hamilton. Hey, Lee.
Producer Joe, nice to chat with you. You got a lot of work to do, though, because I entered the podcast world probably about the same time you did. On my podcast, I'm up to about 275 shows already. So you need to run uphill a little bit more. But how you doing? Good to see you. And thanks for the
Well,
invite.
let me ask you a question, Lee. Do you have a full time job which keeps you pressed down and busy? No, I'm sure you're a busy man. This is about as much as I can pull off at this point in my life, but I'm having fun with it, and I'm really
Well,
happy for your show. I do catch it.
the most interesting thing for somebody who's not supposed to be working, I'm working an awful lot because I do two podcasts a week, My World of Sports on YouTube channel. And then I have a sports website that I started a long time ago. It's all written. I write on it every night. First thing, breakfast in the morning, you need to check out leehacksawhamilton.com. You won't believe the volume of sports information that's there. And then I do some freelance stuff, and I'm a part of KUSI's Saturday morning sports package, and they give me a big window to do sports commentary, which is very different because nobody in the market's doing sports in the morning. They've given me the freedom to take the thing anywhere I want. So for somebody who's not working full time, I'm sure working full time because that's who I am. That's who I've always been. That's the thing I will always be till I hit the finish line.
I mean, it's certainly a blessing to have you in this town. As I said, I've been listening to you for a long time, and I do love your headlines that you bring up. And yes, that website is invaluable. Um, Maybe one day I'll get to your level. Maybe after I am done welding and doing whatever else I do throughout the course of a day, maybe I can do a daily. Or, but right now, this is what we do. So Lee, tell me about the radio bug. How did you come about to sports talk radio?
Grew up in a sports family. Grew up in Long Island. My father was a major league pitcher, Philadelphia Athletics before the war, after the war. Had an uncle that was a very famous sports writer in New York, went off, became a very famous World War II correspondent. I kind of grew up in the environment, Joe. I grew up in a sports background. I'm very fortunate. I've been doing what I've been doing since I was a kid, since I went to college in age 18. I've been doing sports on radio and then sports on TV. Now sports in the modern world as it relates to podcast and technology and websites. So I've done everything I've wanted to do. Has it always worked out? No. Has it been successful? In the bigger picture, yeah, probably has. Have I done things I never ever imagined I would wind up doing? Boy, you're bloody well right with that. So I love to work. I love to interact with people. I've always consumed information. I'm the kind of guy that likes to read, likes to know what's going on, likes to interact with people, likes to gather stuff, likes to obviously have some opinions along the way. So I'm really fortunate to be able to have done what I've done. Is it had challenges? Yeah, really has. The industry, as you full well know, Joe, is really volatile, and that makes
Sure.
it really hard. I've been very fortunate, though. I've hardly had any jobs. I did not move all over the country every 15 months. I didn't drag my wife and kids everywhere. So I've been very stable and very good situations, and I worked forever. I worked like 9 days a week. When you and I first met, I mean, I was burning the candle at both ends and sometimes in the middle, just because that's who I am. So I love what I did. I hope the heritage I've left behind in the marketplaces I've worked at is something that will be remembered and revered. I was kind of the first one through the wall. But I grew up doing this on Long Island, and I went to university in the Midwest at Ohio University, and I climbed the ladder. I started small market Appalachia, mid market upstate New York, major market Cleveland, major market Phoenix, and then here I was the first cornerstone of what would be sports talk radio in Southern California when nobody out here had really touched the format. And at the original Extra 690, we were the pioneers on the West Coast, like WFAM was in New York, WIP in Philadelphia, WEEI in Boston. We were the first one out here. Now there's 2,000 stations trying to do some form or fashion of sports talk, but we were the first one that invented it on the West Coast, and we had quite a ride. Unfortunately, the industry is volatile. Unfortunately, corporate radio came on board, changed a lot of things. Eventually, we all became free agents. We all lost our
Sure.
jobs along the way, but a bunch of us resurfaced. And if you're good, your talent should carry you to be able to bounce back. And I bounced back a couple times, and now I'm doing some really unique and different things because I'm my own boss. And I kind of like that along the way.
Yeah, I'm sure that is nice. And I think part of the one of the ingredients for the secret of your success, uh, I heard many times, a wise man said, "You are bleeping brilliant." Who said that? That was you. Um, yeah. Well, you got a lot of catchphrases, but that's definitely one that stuck with me.
Not everybody agrees with that, but that's okay. Thanks for listening.
What? Sorry.
Well,
Carry on.
it's really fascinating the way sports radio has changed. Like I said, we were the first ones through the wall. We did things that nobody had ever done on the West Coast in Southern California, and we invented it. Everybody's tried to copycat it. Lots have tried. Awful lot of failures along the way. Some with limited success. But what we built at the original Extra 690, which used to be 69 Extra Gold, used to be
Yep.
Rock and Roll Radio, used to be Wolfman Jack, and a whole bunch of other people. And they flipped the format, and we evolved and we grew into sports talk radio. It's fascinating now. And we didn't know, in all honesty, Joe, I came here in 1987, and it was with the mandate. I was coming here to be the voice of the San Diego Chargers, and I was the first guy to do sports talk on that big signal station. And the mandate was, we're going to grow this and we're going to make it all sports. And I didn't even think going all sports was going to work because I had come out of a news talk background. I had been in Phoenix, and we had a very successful news talk station at the legendary KTAR. And prior to that, I was in Cleveland at a legendary news talk station, 3WE. So I cut my learning curve in news talk, and I thought we were just an integral part of the whole big format. And I got here, and ownership, led by just a brilliant guy, John Lynch, said, "No, we're going to take this thing all sports." And I didn't understand. I didn't realize what the game plan was. When they hired me, it was the strangest phone call of my life because I didn't think I would fit what they were telling me, and I didn't have any understanding of what John Lynch was proposing. But it came here, we worked really hard, and we surrounded it, and we built it, and we kept adding cornerstones to the point we really had some dynamic people here. And now I've learned to appreciate what we created because I've had broadcast people from all over the country who are involved in the format or in management in the format come back and say, "How did you guys do what you did at Extra 690? Our reputation nationwide as being one of the first was really, really unique, and we set a different standard." And sports talk in different markets has different personality, different approaches, different content. But we were the first one on a big signal, and that was the key to the raging success of Extra 690, where we were on 50,000 watts and we became 77,000 watts on a Mexican licensed tower. And I use the catchphrase from Baja to the Canadian Rockies. Trust me, Joe, at night, that signal went everywhere. It boomed up and down the West Coast. And so
Sure.
So we're proud of what we did. We didn't realize it when we were doing it, and it's only after the fact, now that they're writing history books about the format, and the format is everywhere, that we have now come to understand how cool it was of what we did, not just in San Diego, but what we did into Orange County, into Los Angeles, and what we
Mhm.
did up and down the West Coast with that blowtorch signal. So that's a pretty neat legacy to have to leave.
You mentioned John Lynch, and he was at that pizza shop that you and I went to a couple months ago. And excuse me, I made it a point to mention to him that, I was there for not there, but I was around for all the iterations from the beginning. I mean, shoot, I remember when Dr. Joe Sobel was on 690, um, and then it morphed further and further. So I've been here to hear all of the changes, and it's just fantastic. I'm blessed to have lived through all that.
Well, the funniest story was I was in Phoenix at KTAR, and I had pioneered sports talk radio on a really great news talk station that kind of took over the market. And I had this ideology of how to do sports talk, and it was very different than anybody else had ever done. The whole world always did mom and pop talk shows, and everything is nice. And I hit the floor running in Phoenix, and I told people what I thought, and the phone lines lit up like a Christmas tree, and people went crazy because I had opinions, and they weren't always popular opinions. Anyhow, so I'm at work. I've been in KTAR 7 years, and I thought I was going to stay there forever. I'd actually just bought a house, and phone rings one day, and it's one of the vice presidents from John Lynch's company. At that point, it was called Noble Broadcast Group. And he introduced himself and said, I'm such and such, representing John Lynch, Noble Broadcast Group. We know who you are. We know what you've accomplished. We just got the rights to the NFL San Diego Chargers. And I was doing Sun Devil football. And I said, would you like to come talk to us about being the voice of an NFL team? I said, wow, for sure. And he said, we also have other great game plans. So we had dialogue, and we talked a little bit on the first phone call. And I didn't really know very much about San Diego as a market. I thought it was a small market, et cetera. And I'd only been here one time. And he said, well, we're a Mexican licensed station, and we just got the rights to the NFL, and we have a 50,000-watt AM signal, and it's all music, and we're going to change it probably into news talk or news talk sports or maybe all sports, and we want you to be the first guy. So I took all this information in, and he said, yeah, and the call letters are XETRA, extra sports. Okay. And I said, well, the only problem is I don't speak Spanish. And he started to laugh. And I said, well, I thought you wanted me to come here and do NFL play by play in Spanish. And then he backtracked, and he said, no, 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 we're going to flip this signal, and we're going to go news talk or news talk sports or maybe all sports. And we will broadcast from a Mexican tower on a Mexican signal, but the studios will be in San Diego on Pacific Highway. We're going to build them here, et cetera. So that was my introduction to Noble Broadcast Group. And I thought about it, and I said, yeah, I'll come. And I came. And Joe, it was a strange experience because I was a sports talk guy doing NFL football on a station that was still playing the hits from back in the day. You know, the movie American Graffiti, Wolfman Jack, music, all
Yep,
that.
that's
That's
right.
who that's who we were, Joe, when I first got here in 1987. And it was unique and it was different. I knew what the game plan was, but it wasn't happening at a very fast pace. And I kind of went with the flow, and they gave me freedom to create everything I had to create. And that included a 9-hour game day broadcast, which nobody else in the league was ever doing. And it included, obviously, doing 4 hours of sports talk in the evening. So towards the end, Wolfman Jack was my lead in. And he was so much fun to be around. And he had his entourage, and he'd come clog
Oh
up
wow.
they'd clog up the studio. And he kind of liked me because I was a little bit irreverent. And of course, he was ultra irreverent. And he would just promote the crap out of my show. My man Hacksaw is coming up at 4 o'clock this afternoon. He's going to talk sports, but right now, here's the Everly Brothers. Da, 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 da. It was so much fun. And then we changed the station. They flipped it into News Talk. They didn't give it enough time. It would have grown. We had a lot of really good components. And instead, John Lynch opted out of News Talk. That whole format of News Talk then went north to Los Angeles. It became KFI, and KFI is still an icon in Los
Yep.
Angeles broadcasting. And then that set the stage for us to become Extra Sports 690. And then we grew. And then they hired different day parts. And some of the ways they found guys was absolutely strange. They had no knowledge of what they were doing. Now, they may say, "Oh, we had a game plan to hire all these people." Trust me, I was on the inside. They were stumbling, and they found guys, and they hit the jackpot. And what we did over the group of years with the Chargers broadcast as the anchor, but the big signal plus the play-by-play plus dynamic personalities just made the station a legacy in the world of sports. We launched in August of '87. All Sports, I think, took over in 1990. We were on the air at the same time. WFAN launched in New York, WIP launched in Philly, and WEEI in Boston launched. So we were the four stations that kind of laid the groundwork for what the format would become. And now every major market's got sports talk stations or multiple sports talk stations, and little places have sports talk stations too, of all makes and models. So it's kind of cool now that when I get together with friends in the format, we always talk about how the hell did you do that? Why'd you do that? How'd you become successful at what you did? And that's what we did. And John Lynch was the idea man, and he was the money man, and he was a big sports fan. So it was just a really unique and different special time. And now we think back and say, wow, that was really great.
Sure. And you were right there at the forefront of it. I mean, you had an empty canvas, and you were just able to paint, and it's just fantastic. I still marvel at it because I listened ardently. I mean, I was. Then you had some pretty cool gimmicky things. I don't mean gimmicky in a negative way for sure, but there was always those trading cards that you all had, and some of the promotional materials were just the best.
It's called
It
shtick.
was
It's called shtick, and we all had shtick, and we all came at it from different angles.
sure.
Let me just give you a quick background about how we hired, who we hired, why we hired, and what wound up after we hired them. I was the first piece of the equation. The second piece of the equation was they found a midday show. They actually went to Los Angeles to interview a veteran sports talk guy, Bud Furillo, who had been very, very popular up at KABC doing Dodger talk and all that. Well, he had a running mate. He had a partner, Steve Hartman, young guy. Well, when they went through the interview process, Steve Hartman was more impressive than Bud Furillo. And John Lynch came back and said, I found this guy in LA, Steve Hartman. Well, I didn't know very much about him, except he worked for the Raiders. Well, la-di-da. So anyhow, he said, we're going to hire Steve Hartman. He's going to be the second guy in after you went through the wall. So you've got to find somebody to work with him. So they talked and they tried different people and they were finding chemistry. And all of a sudden, this guy from New York showed up. This guy was Chet Forty. Chet Forty, of course, had been a legendary producer, director of Monday Night Football on ABC TV. I mean, he was an icon in that end of the spectrum of broadcasting. But Chet had lost his job, and Chet had been in trouble because he was a gambling addict, and Chet's career was effectively over. John Lynch brought him out, and I knew Chet. I had interviewed Chet way back when he was with Howard Cosell and Dandy Don Meredith, and I remembered him. And he said, I'm going to pair these guys. And he said, what do you think? And I said, I think this could work. And Joe, I told him, I said, what you've got is you got young guy, Steve Hartman, West Coast bias. You got old guy, Chet Forty, East Coast knowledge. And they would sit there and they would argue back and forth. And it was electric radio. And nobody else was doing it. Of course, Chet was with us for just a short period of time and he passed away. And then they said, we got to find somebody that matches Chet. And I said, I got the guy. I said, I got this guy in Philadelphia that I use as an NFL insider, Philly Billy Warndell.
That was you, huh?
I blame me. Thank you. They brought him out here. And I said, you ought to pair this guy with Hartman. And what happened? Reincarnation of the loose cannons. Exact same stuff. Loudmouth young guy, old guy East Coast. Everybody with opinions. And we got the loose cannons reinvented again. So that was the second hire. And then Jim Rome showed up, intern, Cal Santa Barbara, young guy, opinion guy, gave him a weekend show. And they wanted to find a place for him because he was really different. I mean, he wasn't me. He wasn't the loose cannons, but he had his own niche. And he found and he became very successful. And then they planted him in mid-mornings. And then he eventually went national with a national talk show. I was supposed to be the guy to do it, but I backed away from it because we got something really good here in Afternoon Drive. Why would we want to take me national and screw up the Afternoon Drive show? And messed around with it, where they would put Rome, and they settled at 10 a.m. and that worked. And Jim, with his own niche, his own phraseology, that thing took off. They
Have a
struggled.
take, don't suck.
Exactly. And then they struggle to find morning shows, and they tried a whole consortium of people. Some worked, some were bombs, etc. One of the groups they came up with were Mason and Ireland, and it panned out. Those guys wound up going to Los Angeles. And then John Quintero showed up. John,
Mhm.
big on high school athletics. Why not take him, plug him into the evening, let him sales pitch high school athletics and draw that following and that listenership? And the coach became an integral part. So at the end of the day, we hired all these day parts. Some of it fell in by accident, others because of recommendations. We had a really good team. And that went on for a long period of time. And then John eventually sold the stations, sold it to Clear Channel. Clear Channel, or no, sold it to J-Core. J-Core merged with Clear Channel. Clear Channel then became iHeart. Things
Mhm.
changed. Corporate radio came in. A lot of changes took place. We all kind of got moved out, swept aside. John reinvented and then put the mighty 1090 on the air, and most of us, all wound up over there with some unique additions, like Darren Smith came on board, et cetera, and Dave and Jeff and a few other people. So we kind of reinvented sports talk on a different signal. But the one thing that was important was John Lynch was a visionary. He thought, if this is going to work, needs a big stick. He needs an anchor play-by-play, whether it was the Chargers on 690 or the Padres on 1090. And then you need persona, you need people. I will tell you, Joe, it's an expensive format to run. It's very manpower intensive. It's not like sports talk today. Back then, we did live local. There was really no ESPN radio and network affiliations. None of that stuff existed.
Yep,
It
live
was
and
a very,
local.
very expensive format to be in, but history will write what we accomplished under John Lynch's guidance and vision, and what the talent did for 690 and then 1090. That was a phenomenal run, starting, say, in 1990 and progressing really up into the early mid 2000s. And then 1090 went away in an ownership problem, and then the people reinvented the format on FM radio, et cetera. So, but we were the ones that laid the cornerstone and put the pavement down for everybody to follow us. And can't forget what we did and how creative it was, and because we were the first ones ever to do it. And there was nothing in Orange County, and LA sports talk radio at that point was mom and pop Dodger talk. Everything is beautiful. Well, everything's not beautiful. And when we made the format a national format, we talked about everything, and we had opinions on everything. And people were going crazy waiting for us to get on the air with a morning show at 6 a.m. or what Romy would do at 9 a.m. or what Hartman and the Loose Cannons would do, and then what I do at 4 o'clock, or what the coach would say at 8 o'clock, because we all came at it from different angles, and we didn't talk about the same stuff. We all talked about diverse,
That's
unique,
right.
very different things. So we checked
Everyone had their own flavor.
we checked off all the boxes, Joe. You're correct, and I think
Yep.
we appealed to an absolute ton of people. That's the story of how we got to where we are.
So I'm just going to test my own memory here. You mentioned Bill Werndell. Now, did you have him on your show before he was hired? No,
Oh yes, I used him.
because here's my test. Because he was with Our Lads Draft Guide.
Yep,
God,
that's
see, it
where we
still works. Still works.
that's where we crossed paths initially, and then
Yeah,
I started having him on weekly to do NFL notebook stuff, and he was really good, and he was really
yeah,
different, and he had
yeah.
that
He was.
twang, and I mean it was the most unique thing, and then he came out, he moved out here, and he left Philadelphia where he had been, fairly successful doing a wide variety of things, and man, he hit a home run here because he was a perfect ploy for what Steve Hartman was all about. So the chemistry with multi-team guys, multi-personalities on one show, sometimes that's really hard to make work. We just happen to hit it with a lot of the unique personalities that we still have. Mason and Ireland are still on the air up in Los Angeles. Hartman and Werndell had a long, long run here. Darren Smith eventually came to the market from ESPN Radio. He did very well for a long chunk of time with Marty Caswell. I kind of was a standalone solo guy until they flipped me to do morning shows because they needed something different in the morning. And then I went and did what they asked me to do. I don't know that it worked out real well, but I did it for a large chunk of time, and I liked it. So and that it's a unique chemistry that we were able to put together, and none of us knew that it was going to turn out to be this great. And now you ask all these guys about what the hell we accomplished from 1990 to the early 2000s. Pretty
Well,
doggone impressive.
proof is in the pudding, man. I mean, it's in the books. It's it was a great time for me. I can tell you that much. I got some notes here. I just kind of want to bounce around. You mentioned Chargers broadcasts. Tell me about how fun those must have been.
Well, we weren't very good very early. It was unique when they brought me in. They said, "You're going to create a 9-hour game day." I said, "Wow." See, I had created an 8-hour Sun Devil Saturday game day at Arizona State, and I had to creatively come up with unique content for pregame shows and how we would do postgame shows, etc. And they knew the format, and the format was created because they needed inventory to sell in the advertising market. Now the team wasn't very good, but because we were the first ones doing it, it kind of became fascinating for the fans to get involved. And NFL Game Day then became really special. We called the countdown to kickoff. And we'd go on the air so early from East Coast games, and we'd do it live from the stadium, and then we'd do a big post-game talk show, and we'd obviously do the play-by-play in the midst of all that. So that we created unique content that nobody at that point in time was doing. Everybody's tried to follow it since that point in time, but you need the right personalities to do it, etc. So it was novel. And the broadcast team we put together after John Lynch got the rights, he said, "This is our guy. He is going to design it." And then we hired Jim Laslovic as a color analyst. And Jim had been a Charger linebacker and a Packer linebacker and a Lion linebacker, and then had become a TV sports anchor at NBC7. And Pat Curran came with the package. And Pat was the former tight end and business manager. And those two guys were so different from a personality standpoint. And then after Pat left, after the Super Bowl run we added Chet Forty. He was with us for only 1 year, but the stories he would tell were so magnificent of all the things he experienced with Cosell and Dandy Don and Monday Night Football. I mean, it was just like History 101 as part of our broadcast. So we had a good run. It's too bad it ended the way it did when Dean Spanos left our station because he thought he could get a better payday elsewhere. And they never, ever were able to duplicate what we did because they didn't have us driving the format, driving the content, etc. And then they eventually yanked the franchise out of San Diego and moved, which created a hole in the heart of an awful lot of people. So we did things that had never been done. And because we were the first ones to do it on the West Coast, Rams didn't do it. When the Raiders moved into Los Angeles, their station didn't do it. We were doing 9 hours, and it was a lot of hard work, and we were on the air forever, and we did 9-hour draft day broadcast. I mean, Joe, you're a football fan. You would probably remember a lot of the unique and very different things we did. So it was first time opportunity, and we hope we left a real legacy behind.
Show me your lightning bolt.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, you mentioned that this is the 30th anniversary of the Chargers run of the Super Bowl just these past couple of weeks. And if you go on YouTube, if you go YouTube, NFL Films, Chargers Road to the Super Bowl, I worked with NFL Films. I did a lot of freelance stuff on the side, and they took a whole bunch of my play-by-play, and they turned it in, I'd say, to a 10 or 12-minute segment of that specific year, the Chargers, and that specific game when the Chargers beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh. I call it the greatest moment in Charger football history to win the AFC title and go to the Super Bowl to play the 49ers. That's out there. I'd totally forgotten about it, and somebody emailed me a link a couple of years ago, and I played it. I had not paid attention to listen to it in years upon years, and it was electric. And I sent it to everybody that's on my email network who loves the NFL or is related to the NFL or was involved with the Chargers in the NFL. And they all got a real kick, but it's out there because now it's out there forever. So if you just go Chargers Road to the Super Bowl YouTube channel, you probably see the production that we put together is kind of cool.
Dennis Gibson knocks down that pass and seals the fate for the Chargers.
That plus the two Stan Humphries touchdown passes that saved the season, kind of lost in the radar of that Pittsburgh Steeler win was I thought we were going to get blown out really early because Pittsburgh went down on the opening kickoff and scored at all. And we had never won in Pittsburgh. It was a terrible place to play. And then Chargers just hung in there and hung in there. And Bobby Ross was lecturing his players. The league says we have to play 4 quarters of football. We're going to play 4 quarters of football, damn it. And then they did. And then they punched Pittsburgh in the mouth, and Natron Means started the run. And they were blitzing the hell out of Humphreys, and he was taking hits. And yet Humphreys stood in there and hit a touchdown bob that Tony Martin stood in there, and they ran a play action that sucked in the Pittsburgh defense. He had a pass out that flat to the tight end, Alfred Papuno, who ran down the sideline and scored. And then Gibson obviously made the play on the fourth down play down on the goal line. So that stuff's out there forever. It's on YouTube. So it's kind of cool. If you got fans of your podcast who are Charger fans, check it out. I think you'll get a nice flashback. And this was the 30th anniversary of those accomplishments.
I'll try to add a link to this show for that before I send this out. I want people to see that for sure. So before we switch into baseball here, tell me about your thoughts on that exciting Super Bowl we just had.
Well, yeah, 2 great teams, 2 really good coaches. But you know what? You give brilliant people 2 weeks to prepare, Joe, that changes everything. Kansas City was not vintage Kansas City this year because of injuries more than anything else.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people were yakking, oh, we're tired of the Chiefs being in the Super Bowl, blah, 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 blah. Appreciate the accomplishment. To get back there 3 years in a row and have the potential to win it a third straight time, nobody's ever done that. Your team from one year to the next, Joe, never the same. People retire, people get injured, people get hurt. Franchises change in a 12-month span. And for Andy Reid and those guys to hold it together, to do what they did with Mahomes, and then to survive all the injuries. But that being said, they were flawed this year. It was not vintage Kansas City Chief football. And Nick Sirianni and those guys wearing green figured it all out. And they mugged them at the line of scrimmage. I just happen to think that Philadelphia had the best defensive line in the NFL. That point was proven with the 6 sacks, the 9 pressures, the 15 hits on Mahomes. Best defensive front. Also, damn good offensive line. Best offensive line in the NFL. What they do, Saquon Barkley had great games during the course of the season and the playoffs. And then they shut down Barkley in the Super Bowl game. No problem. They had Jalen Hurts beating them on single coverage, throwing deep time after time. Again, wound up with 292 yards. So Eagles, amazing accomplishment. Eagles, an amazing team. But appreciate the accomplishment of Andy Reid and Kansas City. So that was a good game. It was a great season. We had a select few teams in the upper galaxy of the NFL. The rest of them were trying to get to that point and couldn't do it. But it was an electric season, as witnessed by what we just saw with the TV ratings coming out tonight. 127.7 million, all-time record. Watched the Super Bowl globally. Phenomenal.
Well, we're going to switch over to baseball right now. And before we get into the Padres or anybody else, I mean, we have a team in the Rays who don't have a ballpark right now due to their roof getting destroyed. We have the A's, which are going to be playing up in Sacramento. I feel like this is going to be a very interesting year for Major League Baseball.
Well, you haven't added into the argument, the equation, the conversation, the evil empire, a.k.a. West Coast edition, Dodger baseball, and all the money that they spent in free agency.
I was getting there. We can't escape that one.
I think baseball is right now probably at an all-time high in popularity. And the attendance has rocketed. Pace of play of the game has changed and helped a great deal. New rules have helped. Free agency, the amount of money that's being paid to these guys, the gross revenue. Baseball is now a $12 billion a year sport. It wasn't that long ago, baseball was like $4 billion. So baseball has really arrived, and now you can watch baseball, all types of channels, all different ways. So it's a very, very different game, and now it's become really more of a global game with the arrival of an awful lot of great players from the Pacific Rim, led by the current superstar, Shohei Ohtani. Baseball's in a very different place right now, and that's good. It used to be the national pastime and said, yeah, it's past time now because the NFL has surpassed it. Well, the NFL is the most popular, but baseball has really had a resurrection. So it's going to be fun. Do I agree with everything in baseball? No. Not at all. There's an awful lot of screaming about the evil empire Los Angeles Dodgers. They didn't do anything illegal. The union has allowed them to defer salaries. Unions signed off on all this. It's just that they're in the number two market, like New York is in the number one market. Boston's a major market. These other big market teams have the revenues and the cash flow. They could creatively do this. To me, Joe, and I'm a baseball purist, that's where I came from. I came from a baseball family. But to me, the only concern I have is it good for the sport if you have five really good franchises who can
Yeah.
spend all the money in the world and 25 others that can't or won't?
Yeah.
That to me is a real problem. And it's going to get to the point that I'm arguing about on my podcast all the time. I don't think baseball will ever get a salary cap because the union won't agree. But baseball needs the luxury tax in place. And if the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Mets and the Red Sox want to spend what they want to spend, that's fine. But you tax them, and the money goes into a pool, which it is right now. That pool gets distributed to Tampa and the A's and the Pirates and Detroit and small market baseball. What they need, though, is they need what I call a floor to spending. They got the same thing, Joe, in the NFL. They got a hard cap in the NFL, but they have a floor to spending. You got to spend 85% of the revenue you get in payroll. They did it. They have it in the NBA. They have a hard cap with now they have exceptions, but they have a floor. National Hockey League has exploded in popularity. Hard cap, floor to spending. Here's the way this works, real simplistically. Everybody gets revenue share, has to have a floor. You have to spend a certain amount. We can't have Oakland operating spending 37 million, Tampa Bay spending 56 million, Pittsburgh at 68 million. If the Florida spending was 120 million, Joe, every second tier quality free agent pitcher who couldn't get a mega contract with the Red Sox or the Yankees or the Mets, every second tier pitcher would look at Pittsburgh, look at Miami, look at Tampa, because those clubs would have to spend for the floor. Say the floor is 120 million. That would mean more money has to go to veteran quality players who'd go to mid market teams. That makes the mid market team better. So your overall big product is now much more competitive. That's what makes the NFL a success. Is anybody, for the most part, can get to the Super Bowl. Now, doesn't guarantee it because you have organizations that hire bad general manager or bad player personnel guys or screw up the draft. There's no guarantee because injuries are very much part of the fabric of NFL life. But if you had luxury tax and a floor to spending where everybody had to spend at least 120 million, more money to go around to quality players would go to the Athletics and go to Tampa, go to Miami, which would make them better. And I think in the big picture of things, that's what would make the game even better. And trust me, Joe, this winter they're going to have dialogue about that. We'll never get a cap, but the tax will stay in place, and the floor to spending, I think, is the next thing that they have to get to. And I fear there's going to be a work stoppage in 2027 when the CBA expires because the union doesn't want a cap, but the union doesn't want to negotiate a floor. And I disagree with Tony Clark, who's a San Diego native, who's the head of the Players Association. Florida spending makes everybody better. Tony Clark needs to remember he not only represents Juan Soto, the highest paid modern day ball player, he represents every 25th man on every one of the 30 rosters in baseball. And a Florida spending guarantees more money for a lot of other people aside from just the Juan Sotos of the world. I don't know if that makes sense, but you asked the question, I give you my opinion.
Nope, I think you and I see eye to eye on just about all of that right there. Well, speaking of signings, I see that the Dodgers have just or are about to re-sign Clayton Kershaw. I thought for sure he'd be going somewhere else, especially getting pushed out by the recent additions to the Dodgers. But what do I know? And Kenley Jansen has gone over to the Angels. So um, for the Dodgers, I know that they can be a concern. Is there any such thing as too much talent in one clubhouse and perhaps a little conflict? Or do you think that do you think Dave Roberts has what it takes to keep the playing field, pardon the pun,
Uh,
level?
Joe, you raise a really great question. And I think at the end of the day, it's one of the unique aspects that has made Dave Roberts a very successful manager the ability to manage clubhouses, personas, egos. Not only do they have great talent, they have a great esprit de corps within that Dodger clubhouse. You never hear about problems. The Yankees were great spenders in the Steinbrenner era, but they always had conflicts. They had Billy Martin, they had Reggie Jackson, they had Catfish Hunter. They had good guys, they had bad guys, they had strange attitudes and unique personas. We didn't see that with the Dodgers. This is a collection of great players. And although there's a lot of barking about, geez, deferred payroll and all that, Dodgers didn't do anything illegal. The union agreed to
Yeah,
allow this structure. Now, maybe there'll be a limitation as to how many guys you can defer. That'll be negotiated as part of the CBA. Not everybody can do deferrals. The other factor nobody pays attention to, there's only so many guys that you can owe deferred money because you have to pay that credit card bill somewhere down the road. And whereas the Dodgers might be able to pay a credit card bill, they have 12 guys right now with deferred monies. That becomes an issue to Pittsburgh and Detroit and these other markets that just can't afford to defer because that credit card bill does come due. So there'll be some adjustments going forward in the next collective bargaining agreement, but it's easy for the fans to bark at the Dodgers right now. I think the Dodgers, Joe, are going to be in for culture shock. I think they're going to be public enemy number one in every ballpark because the national media and your guys, social media, Sammy's social media, everybody's got a freaking opinion about what the Dodgers did. And somebody expresses an opinion and that goes global within seconds once you hit the send button. Um,
sure.
Dodgers are going to be the enemy, even though there are great guys and that's a great manager, etc. Dodgers are going to get booed a lot. I mean, that Padre Dodger rivalry we have seen develop the last 2 years, Joe, as jerks and Profar was jumping up and down in left field and antagonizing Dodger fans after he went into the stands and grabbed that ball. That's great for baseball. Now it's going to be even more only because of the fact the Dodgers did the business they did. And the Dodgers, as of tonight, I think have a $378 million payroll. And they're gonna have to manage the roster, but they have such a history of injuries that now they got all the pitching depth to go with the great depth. But you raised the most valid point of all. They have very collectively unique personalities in that Dodger clubhouse, and Dave Roberts manages those guys really, really well. Bit of a challenge for the Padres going forward. Obviously, a bit of a challenge for a lot of other teams, what the Dodgers have just done, but it's all legal. Can't wait for opening day. Can't wait, Joe.
Yeah.
I can't wait for the fans in the stands and the first Padre Dodger game, especially down here. It'll be great.
Oh, it's going to be electric. Yeah. Speaking of the Padres, I guess I better change the. I don't want to have a Dodgers logo up here while we're talking Padres. Okay, we got to keep it clean. So speaking of the Padres, so Connor Joe, local kid, signs with the Padres. What's your thoughts? Is he our left fielder?
Well, they've just opened spring training camp. The Cactus League is underway. We're going to get an answer to that in the next 6 weeks. That's why they're bringing all these guys in here. It's interesting. The Padres under Peter Seidler and A.J. Preller used to shop at Neiman Marcus. And now with Peter's passing, tragically, we have different leadership. Obviously, they're rolling the payroll back some, but they're still going to have a significant payroll. But the Padres now are shopping at Dollar General. They're not happy, I'd say that, but that's what they're doing. I mean, they signed 22 minor league free agents, none of them who've done very much at the major league level. And now, within this last week, they've added Gavin Sheets to the White Sox, who's a power hitter but strikes out a lot. They added a great clubhouse leader in Jason Hayward, but his past is probably in the rearview mirror. He's a really good guy, probably got some gas left in the tank. And now, as you allude to, they hired the kid from Poway, Connor Joe, who's got a little bit of power, played well with the Rockies, played well with the Pirates, but he's a second-tier guy. But they're bringing so many of those guys in, maybe they'll hit the jackpot and they'll find a guy or two that can step in. They do have their stars. They do have Tatis, and obviously they do have Manny Machado, and they have the Rookie of the Year in Jackson Merrill, and they've still got a cross-section of really good established major league pitchers. Now, the negative is they got a payroll that's probably 218 million right now, which is a little steep for ownership that wants to get it under 200 million. So somebody might be leaving. He might not be leaving in spring training, might not leave by opening day. They can keep these guys till the trading deadline, August 1st, see if they can stay in the pennant race. If they're not in the pennant race with impending free agency for Cease and Arise, one of those guys probably gets moved because they don't configure the luxury tax till October 1st. So even if the Padres are at 218, which would trigger a tax, at 218 they can compete. They do have to meet their payroll on the 1st and 15th of every month and to be paying a lot of money. I just don't know that they get fair value. If you trade Dylan Cease now, you get younger players, but you get somebody the equal of Dylan Cease in your rotation. If you trade a Rise, yeah, he's a one-dimension guy. Are you going to get somebody who's going to hit 318, get on the base all the time, and move runners, etc.? I don't know. It's a tough situation. AJ Preller's done a brilliant job, but he's done a bombastic job too with some of the contracts he's given out, and he's put himself in a tough situation. And I've said this in my podcast, and they're not real happy at times with what I say. He's positioned himself now that he has to make a trade because he doesn't have enough to replace what he's losing, and
including Musgrove.
He's got all these veterans with mega contracts that he can't trade, and he's got no farm system because he's traded the farm system 3 times to put this roster in place. So they got a bit of a challenge ahead of them. But as AJ told me a week ago, I don't need to make a trade right now. I just need to make the right trade if I'm going to make the trade. And whether that's a Rise or whether that's Dylan Cease remains to be seen, or Robert Suarez, etc. They do have to find another starting pitcher. Obviously, they got to find a left fielder. Do they have the right catcher? We don't know. They got 2 really good kids in the farm system, but they are at least a year and a half to 2 years away, the catcher and the shortstop. So it's going to be fascinating. It's a great baseball town. What we've done in terms of attendance, what we've done in terms of gross revenue for the Padres is phenomenal. And I first met Peter Seidler when he came on board with Ron Fowler. And I told those guys at Petco Park one day, I said, this is not a small market franchise. This could be a great baseball market franchise. If you put a good product on the field, San Diego will come support a good product on the field. You're in the Gaslamp Quarter or the great stadium. And by the way, this place is a melting pot for people from everywhere. I guarantee you will sell out if you have a good team and the Red Sox are coming to town, or the Pirates or the Giants, or obviously the Dodgers. Whoever it is showing up. You'll get out-of-towners who've moved here with their emotional ties still back home will come. And what's happened the last 3 years? Crowds are phenomenal. Joe, I saw you drinking beer. You're down there at Petco Park at Gaslamp Quarter. Why? The place to be, destination point. Got to win, but they have, and now they're capitalizing on how big San Diego's become and how diverse the interest is. But it's not a complete team right now, and I haven't forgotten the disappointment of last year being 1 game away from eliminating the Dodgers and losing on Opening Day, and then going 24 straight innings without a run at the end of the season when they totally came out of character. So that kind of still gnaws at me. And they have a short window to do it because of the aging players with long extended contracts. I think it's got to happen this year or next year for them to be a World Series team, because it's not going to happen after that.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And I've lived in this town my whole life, been a Padres fan my whole life. I've seen it all. Not enough winning seasons. So I'm running out of time. So please, let's do it now.
I concur. But it's so electric to be down there. About 3 years ago, I mean, the first really good season they had, and it was after Manny Machado arrived, etc. The first good season, I went down there a lot, and I still do. But I've been down there, and I thought to myself, this crowd is like a San Diego Charger playoff crowd. Yeah. And that started to happen, Joe, every home game. I mean, it was so much fun. It was just fascinating.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. We've seen it all, and let's make it this week, huh, Padres? Like you're watching. So, Saw, you got anything else here to add before we wrap her up? I do want to add, I want people to check out your podcast, please, and your website. It is invaluable. You've got so much information on there. Please go to Lee's website, check it out, watch his podcast. You've done it all, and you do it the best. So please keep it going, Saw. For my sake, keep doing this.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. I enjoy working. This is who I am. This is who I am, baby. As they said in the movie Jerry Maguire, when Cuba Gooding said, "This is who I am, baby." I enjoy it. I like it. It's a labor of love. I do spend an awful lot of time on it. I hope fans value it. I hope fans will network and tell all their friends who we are and what we do on the podcast, and obviously what we do on the website, which is written every day of the year. I wish, in closing, the one thing I wish, in all honesty, is that this community, which lost its football team and has a hole in its heart, would take that football passion and wrap their arms around San Diego State, because they really need support. and they're going through a rough time. And I
Yeah.
don't like anything I'm experiencing in college football with the NIL and the transfer portal. That's going to change, I think, within 2 years' time. It has to change. But this program can't survive with a football team that they've had in the last couple of home games at the end of last season at the shiny new Snapdragon Stadium, Joe. They drew 10 or 12,000 walk in. Can't survive. And they haven't marketed well. Obviously, the product hasn't been great the last couple of years, but prior to that, it was really good. They need to find a way to touch the heart of these deposed Charger fans and get these people to come support these kids. Basketball's turned out unbelievable. Who would have thought San Diego, with its failed history in the ABA and the NBA, would turn out to be an electric basketball community? I'd love to see that happen for Sean Lewis and the Aztec football program, because it'd be good for the kids, good for the community, and success grows upon success. That would be my wish for 2025, that our community would wrap its arms around Aztec football and support this thing so they could help grow it and make it vibrant again. The Falk era was a long time ago, and that was pretty damn electric football. And we really had good years with Brady Hoke and Rocky Long. Now, granted, the environment of college football has changed. The death of the Pac-12 to me was discouraging beyond belief that USC and UCLA did that to the conference. It goes back to 1915. I know we're going to a new quote new Pac-12, but to me it's not really going to be different from the old WAC or the Mountain West. It just will have a different banner. But community needs to put its arms around San Diego State football, like they've done what they've made at Viejas Arena. Because I saw you sitting in those end zone seats with your face painted red and black for basketball. I'd like to see the same thing in football.
Let's do it. Yeah, absolutely. You heard the call. Let's get out there. Well, Lee, appreciate you coming on. It's been a little time coming. We finally got it done. You're welcome on here anytime. I have a lot of friends who are big fans of yours. And again, thank you for your time. Super appreciate it. Everybody else, go check out his website. Go watch his podcast. A lot of fun. Lee, thank you so much. And I appreciate your time, buddy.
Joe, we've been friends a long time, and I know you enjoy being in and around the broadcast industry and contributing the way you do. And we've enjoyed interacting with the fans. Always great to chat with you. I'm sure we'll talk again. Thanks, Joe.
You too, Lee. You're a good man. We'll talk soon. Okay, buddy?
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Bye now. So that was fun. Wow. The memories I have of listening to Lee on the radio for so many years, just an institution and an architect of how we know sports talk radio. So, again, thank you, Lee, for coming on the show. And please excuse my ADHD because I'm pressing buttons and doing all this. But again, thank you. And remember the Producer Joe Show, because everyone has a story to tell. And I truly believe that. So, anyways, we will wrap it up here. You guys have a good afternoon, evening, morning, night, whatever it might be. And we'll talk to you real soon.